Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum, very good morning, and Salam Madani. The purpose of this session is basically to give some kind of a heads up, what is going to happen and what is happening around the world and what is going to happen in Malaysia in terms of data protection law and perhaps cybersecurity laws and opportunities in those two areas. So let's get started. If you want to know my CV or my biography, you can just go to my LinkedIn page. This is the title I've chosen for this session, and basically, perhaps at the end of the session, I can inspire you to consider exploring careers in this area of data protection and cybersecurity. First slide, Ajit. Very simple in terms of the agenda, reality check, data protection law, and last but not least, career opportunities. First, reality check. Ajit. The magazine of the Economist magazine in 2017 published this image and says that the world's most valuable resource is no longer oil, but data. What do you think of this? Okay, next slide. Again, more or less the same image given by other journal. Next slide, please. How about this? A brief comparative done by MDAX between Google and ExxonMobil. You can see there. So I borrowed this from MDAX. Yeah. In terms of market capital, this is for first quarter of 2015. 368.6 in terms of market capital, then 251.4 billion in terms of physical asset as compared to Google, 24.45. Look at the revenue for the first quarter of 2015 earned by ExxonMobil, 4.9 billion compared to Google, whereas Google managed to get a revenue of 17.3 billion within the same period of time. And interestingly, ExxonMobil took 137 years to get that revenue, and Google took 15 years to get that. What do they have? Especially Google. Technology and data. Whose data? Our data. So if data is the new oil, then have a look at that statement by former IBF data scientists. If data is in the oil, we are all wealth and potentially valuable ones, because we generate data. Every second we generate data. Whatever we do, we generate data either offline or online. Let's move on to the other slide. Economic significance of data. These are well known. Data are the new most valuable assets in the modern economy. Data play an increasingly fundamental role as a parameter of competition. Data are indispensable to development of potential game changers such as AI. Data are a crucial input to many online services, production processes, logistics, and therefore it is a critical element of the value chain of numerous industries. Data can be used to create innovative business models and entirely new markets such as fintech. So these are some of the reality checks about data and the importance of data in the economic sector. Next slide, please. This is another reality check. Data protection, just now we talked about data, now we're talking about data protection. Data protection is high on the agenda of the international as well as national regulators or policymakers around the world. The United Nations in 2015 appointed a special rapporteur on the right to privacy. And the first rapporteur of UN on the right to privacy was Professor Joseph Kanataki from Malta. And it happened that he's a good friend of mine. And now someone took over his position as a special rapporteur. The United Nations has issued data privacy ethics and protection. We know that the world are trying to achieve SDG by 2020, and then there will be massive collections of data, big data, processes of data. Therefore, there must be some kind of guidelines where companies should observe when they collect data in trying to achieve SDG goals or Sustainable Development Goals 2020. United Nations General Assembly has adopted resolution on the right to privacy in the digital age. Data protection has been included in several international instruments like RCEP, TPP, and other international trade treaties. Data protection regulation has been considered in several high-profile cases, including a case involving Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. I think you know about this case. FTC has imposed the highest fine in history against Facebook because of the so-called unlawful activities involving Facebook and Cambridge Analytica in the UK. Numerous countries are drafting new laws on data protection. Some are trying to review and update their data protection laws. And of course, some guidelines have been issued by international organizations like WHO. Next slide, please. This is G20 declarations. You see the highlighted part. It talks about transborder data flow and the importance to protect privacy and personal data. G20 in Bali, yeah, not the latest one in New Delhi, but it was G20 in Bali. Last year. Next slide, please. For the first time, Zuckerberg admitted that in terms of the income they receive has declined due to privacy issue. And this refers to the case involving Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. Okay, next slide, please. Data protection law. The blue color represents countries around the world which have enacted a comprehensive data protection law. So we can see that most of the countries are represented by blue color. So the latest one is India. I think 2 months ago, a month ago, India has come up with the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. So India should be in blue color now. And you see in the Middle East, I think last year or 2021, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia somewhere in September enacted the law, then followed by UAE, followed by Oman. And of course, Australia is trying to revamp the Privacy Act, and some proposals have been accepted by the government of Australia. Perhaps we can talk about what are the significant changes of the privacy law in Australia. Next slide, please. This is a development in America. As we know, in America, there is no comprehensive law at the federal level. So the law in the US is very much sectoral based. So we have Federal Trade Commission Act, Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA. We have Health Insurance Portability and Accounting Act, HIPAA. We have Fair Credit Reporting Act. We have they have Financial Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA. But at the state levels, there have been some states have enacted comprehensive law on data protection. Yeah? California was the first, followed by other states in the US. Now, the green color represents the states that have enacted comprehensive law in the US. Next slide, please. And at the federal level, the US Congress is debating several drafts. Several drafts have been issued on several draft legislation on data protection have been issued. So they are still discussing potential of having federal law for the data protection in the US. The next slide, please, Ajit. In Asia, or Southeast Asia, Malaysia was the first in 2010 to have the law, followed by Singapore, then followed by the Philippines, then followed by Thailand, and Indonesia recently, last year, or 2022, last year, and then followed by Vietnam. So Vietnam has issued a law on data protection in the form of a decree. And of course, Brunei is still working on the draft and trying to finalize what they call as Personal Data Protection Order to govern private sector, because there is already regulations for the public sector in Brunei. I have been given the opportunity to talk about Brunei's legislation or proposed legislation in one of the seminars recently, so I provided my opinion on the draft law of Brunei. Next slide, please. Malaysia versus the world, selected countries, data protection principles. You see, Malaysia has specifically mentioned what are the principles governing processing of personal data, and all the countries, including Indonesia, and of course EU GDPR provide for that. The difference is that some countries specifically mention the principle. Some countries do not specifically mention, but reflecting, the principles are reflected in the Act or in the law. Rights of data subject, all the countries, including Malaysia, and of course India recently, as I said, provides for rights of data subject. What does it mean? You and me as data subjects or customers are given certain rights under the law. Special enforcement entity, of course, in Malaysia we have Commissioner, we have GPDP, in Singapore they have PDPC, in the Philippines they have authority or personal data protection authority, whatever they call it. Okay? In Indonesia, things are still uncertain because the law has been passed, but the Badan Kelembagaan, they call it, is not yet established. Yeah? Exemption to public sector or public agency, only Malaysia and Singapore, the law in Malaysia and Singapore exempts public sector. In Malaysia, federal and state government. In Singapore, public sector. The difference is that in Singapore, they have a special rules or regulations to govern public sector called Public Sector Governance Act, as well as government instruction manuals issued by the ministry. In Malaysia, we don't have anything to regulate public sector. Okay? Next slide, please, Ajit. Mandatory data breach notification. We don't have that in Malaysia, but I've learned that the proposed amendment will have this. In case of a breach, you have to notify the data subject as well as the authority. In Indonesia, they have that. And in Singapore, this is inserted in the amendment in 2020. In the Philippines, it has been there from the very beginning. Japan amended in 2020, meaning that data breach notification was inserted in the 2020's amendment of the Japanese law. And then Korea has been there. In Hong Kong, it's very much encouraged by the regulator. If there's a breach, you are encouraged to notify the data subject as well as to inform the regulator. Vietnam's decree does not provide for that. Okay? Reporting to the authority, Malaysia doesn't have that, and it's going to be, it is in the proposed amendment. And then Indonesia, again in Singapore, it was inserted in the 2020 amendments. Again in Hong Kong, the regulator encourages people to notify the authority in case of data breach. Personal data and sensitive data, only Singapore does not provide for sensitive data definitions in the Act. The rest, including Malaysia, Indonesia, even Saudi, UAE, Oman, provides for sensitive data. And interestingly, in Saudi, if you look at PDPL of Saudi, marital status is sensitive data. If you look at the Philippines law, Data Privacy Act 2012, educational background is a sensitive data under the Philippines law. So they took into account the culture of the society in coming up with the definition of sensitive data. DPO, Malaysia doesn't have that, but it's going to be perhaps included or in the proposed amendment. This is one of the perhaps elements to be introduced. I'm looking around because I was made to understand there is a representative from the JPDP or the Commissioner's Office. Perhaps he or she can verify this. Okay. Indonesia, yes, DPO is mandatory for public sectors as well as certain companies, including companies doing monitoring or systematic monitoring of data subjects. Singapore, interestingly, in Singapore, not certain companies, but all companies, be it small and medium enterprises, sole proprietors, or big corporations, you have to have even an individual collecting data on individual basis will have to have a DPO. And of course, EU GDPR, and interestingly, in Vietnam's decree, there is a requirement for certain companies to have a DPO. Next slide, please. Yeah, we will discuss DPO in a slightly detail in a minute. Next slide, please. Career opportunities. These are some of the terminology used by companies looking for specialized or people in this particular area of privacy and data protection: data protection officer, privacy compliance officer, chief compliance officer, privacy officer, data privacy consultant, data privacy manager, data privacy analyst, data privacy specialist, chief privacy officer. So you can see this in the advertisement of companies looking for experts using different terminologies based on the job description of the individuals. We are going to focus on DPO. All right. Next slide, please. This is 2016. Forget data scientist. Data protection officer is the sexiest new job. Do you agree with this? Okay. Next slide, please. I took this from the headlines of the reports in the newspaper, including Financial Times, that are officers who have become China's most sought-after staff. Rise of the data protection officer, the hottest tech ticket in town. The rise of data protection officers in Dubai International Financial Center. Rise of the DPO in wake of India's data protection bill. As I said 2 months ago, India enacted Digital Personal Data Protection Act, and there is a requirement for certain companies to appoint DPO. 500,000 DPOs will likely need to be appointed in China in 2020. Organization ready. This is the headline, yeah? Why 2020 is the year of the data protection officer and how to deal with the skills shortage. Next slide, please, Ajit. This is not the amount of DPOs or the numbers of requires, the numbers of DPOs required. This is just the number of companies registered in this part of the world, in our part of the world. Indonesia, 29 million. Thailand, 3.2 million, Singapore, 400,000, Malaysia, 1.4 million, Brunei, 140,000 companies registered. What I'm trying to say is that some of those companies may require to appoint DPO. And of course, if you look, this does not include public sectors, yeah? There was a publication by Kominfo in Indonesia a couple of years ago saying that just for e-commerce sectors, Indonesia require close to 250,000 DPOs. Just public sector and e-commerce business in Indonesia. So we are not talking about the whole sector of the economy in Indonesia. I'm talking about Indonesia because I was involved in assisting the Kominfo in Indonesia to come up with the law on data protection, which was enacted last year. Next slide, please. This is in terms of the salary scale in the US, of course, you can see there. This is the latest one. In early January 2023, job market analysts reported chief privacy officer, this is chief privacy officer, yeah, in the US, are already earning 162,000 US dollar and 270,640 per year. It's quite, you know. Okay, next slide, please. That is Dublin or Ireland. This is Singapore, and that is UK in terms of their salary, yeah, salary scale in US, Ireland, Singapore, and the UK. So you can do your own comparative analysis. Next slide, please. This is from the National Association of Data Protection Officers of the Philippines. DPOs are mini chief executive officers of their respective organizations and are in fact well positioned to become the next CEOs. This is what they say. Okay, next slide, please. This is from Fortune.com in terms of companies looking for DPOs or privacy professional in terms of the demand. So I think you can read yourself about these things. Data privacy workers have become hot commodities in the business world and blah, blah, blah. Okay? So there is a significant increase in terms of companies looking for privacy professional, yeah, for their companies. Next slide, please. This is from Singapore's PDPC, Personal Data Protection Commissioner. The DPO is crucial. So you can read yourself the statement made. An organization with a highly placed professional DPO may well avoid a finding that it has violated the PDPL even though there was a data breach. It shows the importance of DPO in the company. Next slide, please. In Singapore alone, based on what has been said, there are 30,000 DPOs registered with PDPC in Singapore. Next slide, please. This is what the minister said recently. Malaysia mampu jadi harimau digital Asia, memandangkan Malaysia menjadi hub pusat data bagi rantau ini dan seterusnya. Negara boleh menjadi tempat latihan, Ajit, tempat latihan bagi pengamal pemrosesan data untuk rantau ini. So this is after, the statement was made after I met him and briefed him about the importance of DPO and privacy professional. The next day, he made this statement at a press conference, trying to promote Malaysia as a hub for training centers of DPOs or privacy professional. Next slide, please. Mandatory appointment of DPO, Korea, EU, of course, because of EU GDPR, India, Thailand, Philippines, Singapore, UAE, Oman. So those countries require DPO to be appointed by certain companies. Okay, next slide, please. Can you click? Now there are more than 60 countries around the world which require DPO. I mean, the appointment of DPO, mandatory appointment of DPO. You can check the list here. Ajit, can you scroll down? Brazil, Canada, China, article. They give the provision of the law. Colombia, Brazil, Ajit, scroll down, please. Egypt, of course, EU member states, as I mentioned just now. Scroll down, Ajit. I took this from IAPP, yeah? The National Association of Privacy Professionals. Kenya, Ghana, Mauritius, Mexico, New Zealand, Nigeria recently passed the law, and through my contacts there, I managed to do something and to assist the government of Nigeria. Philippines, of course. Next slide, please. Russia, San Marino, Serbia, Singapore, of course. South Africa, South Korea, Thailand. What's that? Ukraine, Uganda. It's a pretty long list. As I said, more than 60 countries now. And of course, India is not listed because it's a new, the law has been just passed recently. Okay? Yeah, go back to the slide, Ajay. DPO as best practice, Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan. Taiwan and China, I think, because there is no direct provision in the PIPL of China specifically stating the appointment of DPO. The provision is a very indirect provision, encouraging companies to have DPO in China. These are other opportunities, perhaps. Yeah, we talk about DPO. Now, in Malaysia, coming back to Malaysia, if you look at Cybersecurity Bill, provision in clause 49, the chief executive may, in writing, appoint any person as a cybersecurity expert or cybersecurity officer for a specific period to provide assistance. Then I'm not sure whether you are aware of the fact that recently in April, Bank Negara Malaysia, BNM, has issued a policy paper called Management of Customer Information and Permitted Disclosures, issued on 3rd April 2023. Standard 9.2, senior management must also designate a person of sufficient senior ranking to take charge of customers' data, policies, guidelines, and everything for the institution. And guideline 9.3, FSPs may consider establishing or designating an existing position, such as Chief Data Officer or Chief Information Officer, to carry out the responsibilities. And interestingly, if you look at how this policy document of Bank Negara defines FSP, it covers a licensed bank, a licensed investment bank, a licensed Islamic bank, a licensed international Islamic bank, a licensed insurer, a licensed takaful operator, a licensed international takaful operator, and approved financial advisor. Is basically A to R. So what I'm trying to convey, the message that I'm trying to convey is that the definition of SSP there is very broad, A to R. What I'm trying to say is that opportunities are great. So with that, thank you so much. This is what the minister said recently in Malaysia. We need to have around 12,000 cybersecurity experts or officers. This is Malaysia. I want you to say you are ready for the future. With that, thank you so much. Perhaps we can have questions.
Dear students, the floor is now open for Q&A sessions. However, I would like to request you to keep the questions short as we are limited in time. Thank you very much. You will use the microphones at the sides. Thank you very much.
Any questions? No? Yeah. Can you just introduce yourself and your affiliation? Can you go to the microphone, please?
Hello. Thank you, Professor, for the wonderful talk. Let me introduce myself. I'm Ricky from the Faculty of Medicine. Actually, I will have this question about as we are coming in touch with data protection of cybersecurity related jobs. What are the training or the requirements required for individuals that is without IT background or to actually be appointed as for this job DPO?
Okay. Okay, basically you are asking about qualification of a DPO, yeah? If you look at EU GDPR, if you look at Indonesian law, if you look at KSA law, you look at the Philippines law, they do not specifically say you have to have a legal background. You have to be a lawyer to be to do a DPO job. Okay? If you look at Indonesia, for example, because this is one of the recent one, as long as you have knowledge and skill in data protection law, that's it. And I think a similar situation under EU GDPR. And if you look at the KSA laws, same thing. Kingdom of Saudi Arabia laws, because I'm involved in the giving my expert opinion on this law of Saudi. I know quite sure about the provision. I'm very sure about the provision on DPO. It doesn't specifically mention that you have to have a law degree to be able to be appointed as DPO, as long as you have sufficient knowledge and skill in data protection law. And of course, I have been meeting DPOs around the world. Some of them with legal background, some of them with technical background, some of them with business background. Okay? So what is important? Knowledge and skill in data protection law, and a little bit on the technical aspect perhaps, yeah? Okay? Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you for that very enlightening speech. My name is Mr. Mohamed. I'm a lawyer. Now,
Okay.
when you started, you said that data is all most important, individually, company. But when you look at the law,
Yeah.
on one side, the business, like Facebook and all that, exploiting that, they get fined. Although you mentioned 5 billion,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they end up paying 5 billion.
Right.
But in terms of gold standard in the world, would you say that you would probably set the standards? Because one of the most important things is that where is the enforcement? Where's the punishment?
Yeah.
We have all the laws, but hardly is there any visibility of who's getting fined. So when there's a requirement for a DPO,
Okay.
what is the DPO's job?
Okay.
If nobody's going to get
Right. Okay.
in that sense. I mean,
Okay.
is the government really
Right.
serious?
Right.
Another one point I want to make is we have two important laws in Malaysia, which is the Cybersecurity Amendment and also the DPP. There's very little visibility for the community to be consulted. So I'm wondering
Right.
where is our minister coming from?
Right. Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Mohan, for the questions. There are two questions basically. First is about enforcement, and secondly about which legislation or which instrument provide the highest standard. I'll take the second question first. Obviously, EU GDPR is the highest standard. In fact, EU GDPR has been described as a gold standard as far as data law is concerned. It has been described as a game changer, and it's being enforced very, very strictly by the authorities in that part of the world. So that brings me to the enforcement in Malaysia. Yes, we have the law. We are first in ASEAN to have the law in 2010. But I have to say that the enforcement is not quite good. But I met the regulator recently, 2 weeks ago, and he told us that it's very serious to enforce the law this time around. Okay, and from 30 staff, they managed to get 60 staff now within 6 months. So that shows they are very serious about enforcing the law, perhaps. Yeah. But in terms of awareness, I recently conducted a survey. Dr. Ali is here, my assistant. Then I will share with you the survey when the time comes. After more than a decade, the findings are still not very good. Awareness is still very low. The trust among the people on the government, on the seriousness of the government to enforce the law is very low. I think around 35% of the respondents. And the awareness about the existence of the law is still very low. About 40% of the, about 40% of the respondents of 1,002 or 3 respondents, we assign a company to do the survey, and then the findings are not encouraging at all. I'm going to basically have perhaps a special occasion to reveal the findings of the survey and to let the government knows that this is something very, very serious. Okay? Other question? Yeah?
Professor, I'm a PhD student. I want to know how do you confirm that the data protection law in Malaysia refer to international treaties or international laws in their consultation papers? Is there a reference that I can refer to?
Okay, there are international instruments in place already, yeah, as early as 1986. The first instrument, of course, that is not binding in the form of OECD guidelines on data protection or data flow and data protection. Very long title, I cannot remember. But there is OECD guidelines. Then, of course, Council of Europe Convention. And then EU GDPR, replacing the directive of 1995, and of course, in APEC, we have APEC Privacy Framework. In ASEAN, we have ASEAN Framework on Data Protection. So what I'm trying to say is that there are international instruments in place. So you can refer to that. If you have any problems of getting hold of that documents, you just send a request to me. I can just provide you the information. Any other question? Yeah, Ratanism?
Thank you so much for your enlightening talk. Let's get into questions here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Number one, actually referring to incident, not so incident, but previous statement given by the minister about a big tech giant and what he mentioned here. What I'm interested to ask here is actually how Malaysia is going next when it comes to the regulatory oversight. Because
Regulatory one? Regulatory one?
regulatory oversight, the
Okay.
independence of
Okay.
the authority,
Yeah.
personal data protection.
Right. Okay.
So if we look across the world,
Yeah.
the process of processing for data protection, and of course in the US you have the FTC, in terms of how come Malaysia is actually looking into, regulating the big tech giants in Malaysia,
Right.
because we're talking about big data now,
True.
where the data is, as you mentioned in the very representation, a lot of prediction of predictive data is actually extracted from the target big tech giants. So you have the big tech giants around in Malaysia. How come Malaysia is actually
Yeah.
winning, or maybe you have some ideas.
Okay.
Secondly, my question, you're talking about the earlier about your survey and of course the effectiveness of our PDP. Personally, I think you may agree as well. The lack of the privacy bias and the lack of the mandatory breach notifications, which makes it very difficult for us to do the assessment whether our law is effective or not. So what's your take on that, or maybe you can have recommendation for that?
Okay. I'll take the second question about data breach, specifically about data breach, and try to relate to the first question on our enforcement or the enforcement of the law in Malaysia. I want to give you a very simple example. There have been so many breaches in Malaysia, involving different organizations, including a big corporation. Where is the report? Do you find any report about the breach? No. In Singapore, our neighbor, you know the case involving Sing Health. It happened in 2001. They conducted the investigation and came up with 400-page report available to the public. So accountability and transparency is very, very important in this area and other areas of, whatever areas. Okay, 400-page report, including recommendation, what had gone wrong and recommendation. I think that is we need something like that in Malaysia. If there is a breach, investigation, report, recommendation. We don't have that. So many breaches. The recent one involving UITM. Yeah? And of course they are saying, we are going to carry out an investigation, but nothing happened after that. We don't see the report, we don't see anything came up from the office. But of course, perhaps one of the factors, because of the fact there is no requirement to notify the data subject, there is no requirement to report to the authority. Okay? So, as I mentioned, in the proposed amendment, this requirement will be inserted or will be incorporated into the proposed amendment. Data breach notification to the data subject and notifying the regulator. About the enforcement, of course, ideally, the enforcement authority should be an independent body. a real independent body, yeah, not subject to the minister and report to the minister. Independent authority reporting to the parliament, yeah. So that is the ideal situation. But of course, we are not in ideal situation, perhaps, yeah. But that is the whole idea. Having an independent regulatory authority or supervisory authority will allow the regulator, the supervisory authority to enforce the law without fear or favor. Recently, the ICO in the UK it is called Information Commissioner Office, yeah. ICO imposed a fine against Cabinet Office and a fine against other public sector agencies in the UK. So of course that is not going to happen in this country because of the fact that the government is exempted. And in my recent conversation, that particular provision of our PDPA is not going to change. Okay? Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Mohan?
Just thinking that the government is now saying that there's going to be multi-billion-dollar investment by Tesla, by AWS, by Microsoft.
Yeah.
The question is, if we don't emphasize on
Yeah.
the protection of this, how are these people going to really invest? And also, most of them are going to Singapore, or they get that incentive. So, I'm just trying to see where the government is
Yeah.
from when there's no serious.
I think we must not confine, we should not look at data protection law just from the point of view of human rights. It's not about human rights, yes, human rights plus a competitiveness of a country. How, data protection law can make a country more competitive. I still remember I was given the opportunity by NUS to give a lecture a couple of years ago. And when they drafted the law, they're looking at the proposal to have a law from that angle or from that perspective, how to make Singapore more competitive in terms of trying to attract investors into the country. And I have given my argument on this aspect, but unfortunately, they refuse to listen. I met AWS, I met Microsoft. They raised their concern about, on this particular issue, the fact that our PDPA does not apply to the federal and state government. And that is not going to change, as I mentioned just now. But from my conversation, as I said, the commissioner was saying, we are hoping that industry can push. It seems that they have tried and they have failed to convince the government, because the argument is that public agencies are not ready. And I asked them, when are they ready? Okay? So I'm giving you some insight of my discussion with the commissioner recently. Any other questions? Ajit? Okay, thank you so much. I hope the session has benefited you all, and perhaps you're ready for the future. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. One more thing before I close. We are talking about DPO, individual becoming a DPO, whatever, but this service can be outsourced. So it can be DPO as a service. So in Europe, for example, there are many legal firms, many consulting firms acting as DPO servicing companies in that part of the world. Thank you so much.